I want both your takes on these hearings so far. I was more skeptical and frankly, I think more dismissive of some of this stuff even 2 weeks ago than I am today. I'm curious. Brandon, let's start with you. What's your perspective on these?
I mean, I think a lot is coming out that we sort of suspected, was true. And I know there's been a lot of, pushback against even having these kinds of hearings on the January 6th insurrection, riot, whatever people call it. But from my standpoint, I think that watching Democrats use, the public platform to harass the Republicans who are prone to their kinds of public meltdowns and are especially used to not having to defend themselves on these sorts of, if they say it like, anti-state schemes they get involved in, that, the more people are exposed to the truth of the Republican Party, the more we can chip away from this sort of myth that they're allowed to propagate, that they are responsible stewards of 50% of our population's votes. They're a fringe party and they should be framed as such. In these hearings and the newest evidence, or rather just the entire body of it, ranging from what we saw on the first day when it came to, I'm sorry, I'm getting a little flustered thinking about, I haven't talked about the hearings in specificity since it first happened, but, I think seeing the direct interactions that a lot of the Republican lawmakers have had with the rioters, giving tours, doing that kind of thing has really done a number on them and put them on the back foot. So that's a good.
Matt, what's your sense of it?
Yeah, I mean, I was skeptical as well at first, and I still have the that critique of they should absolutely be directly suggesting that there are charges brought to certain people, which they said they are not going to do. But because I also still kind of feel like if there are no consequences to some of, we've seen the low level pawns, like the people who were convinced to go down there, and some low level and maybe even some high level Proud Boy guys and the like. But we haven't seen the people in the Trump administration and the Trump family themselves, even some of the higher level Oath Keeper and Proud Boy types who were directly plotting with the Trump cabinet. We haven't really seen them face any real consequences from this yet, and I sort of worry that if this all ends and it doesn't result in anything, then people who aren't so plugged in might just think, oh, they went through with all this and they didn't find anything to charge them with. I guess they didn't do anything. But at the same time, I have been seeing people say oh, my Republican father or uncle or grandfather caught a part of it, and now they're tuning in every day and they're right, questioning certain things, which is certainly interesting. That's certainly good if it's pulling some people out of the idea that the election was actually stolen from Donald Trump, or that he didn't try to do anything to overturn the election, or was actually Antifa. So yeah, I also think that some of the stuff that I assumed that would just be regurgitating stuff I already knew as someone who is very plugged into what happened. I'm surprised to see some of the video footage they were able to get their hands on that hasn't been released yet. In this day and age, you think there would be at some point some of this stuff would have leaked out from the original sources, but they got stuff that wasn't priorly seen. I don't think there was anything too shocking or new in terms of the content, but to see it, I think helps. To see things that we weren't able to see before, it certainly helps.
What's interesting to me is that, and I agree with you in terms of the accountability. That's really important. There is some sort of hints that the DOJ is starting to do stuff, and there's some hints that they have been waiting, because we have to remember these hearings are over November 6th, or I should say January 20th of next year. The Democrats are more than likely going to lose the House. I think it's conceivable they could keep the Senate, but they're more than likely going to lose the House. So there's a clock on these hearings, and so, but there's no clock on the DOJ, or at least it's not for another 2 years. And so the sequencing makes some sense. And you're starting to see the DOJ subpoena today. I think it was yesterday. It was announced they're subpoenaing the chair of the Republican Party in Georgia. The FBI is investigating the phones of a Republican election official in Nevada. And the thing that I find that has been interesting to me about these hearings is, I always suspected that the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and some of this information had come out, that they were the vanguard and they knew this was happening and that they were coordinated. And we've yet to see the connection between the Trump administration and them, but I think that's coming. And the other thing that I think has been surprising to me, though, was just how they really did have a plan with the fake electors. And they not only had a plan, they had sort of like fallback positions within that plan. This is scenario A, which is optimal for our trying to do this, where Michigan or Georgia accepts the fake electors because we can convince somebody there to do it. And then once that happens, all bets are off. And if we can't get them to accept it, maybe we can get the Senate to say there's a question about the electors. And that's where Ron Johnson should be right now sitting with a defense attorney going like, what do I do? And he might be, for all we know, because he got nailed in this. He got nailed. He was part of this. An attempt to defraud the U.S. government. You can't make up electors and have a senator deliver like there's other electors. I've got some information that might stop this wedding, essentially, type of thing. And so I think this is going to be this is all like it's meaningful, and seeing the people who were pressured in this situation, ranging from the electoral worker, even like the head of the Arizona State House, I think had some value. And today, which is really important too, and this is interesting because they were doing a full 360 here. They're going through the story of Jeffrey Clark, and Jeffrey Clark was this sort of like low-level DOJ guy. And when Trump couldn't get the acting attorney general at the time, which was, what's his face?
Jeff Rosen.
Jeff Rosen. He wanted Rosen to say there was corruption in the election, because then that adds one more fuel to the fire on who the electors are. And they wouldn't do it. And they said, like, we haven't found anything. And this guy, Clark, basically reaches out to Trump and says, I'll do it. And like in some ways, he's following what Bill Barr did. People forget that Bill Barr sent Donald Trump like a 7-page brief on how to fight the Mueller investigation when this dude was just hanging out at home, and got it to Trump. And that's why Trump hired him. And Clark basically tries to do the same thing. And when they're all in the office together with Trump, Clark, Donahue, who was, I think, Rosen's assistant, essentially, or, another like subsidiary official in the DOJ. And I think it's Donahue who's also testifying today. And I think, and Rosen is too, right?
Rosen and Donahue are both today.
Yeah. Trump's got Rosen and Donahue in the room with Clark going like, you guys have disappointed me. Maybe I should just fire you and hire this guy as the DOJ. This is like in the days running after January 6th. And Donahue and Rosen basically go, well, and he goes, what would you guys do if I did that? And they say, we'd resign. And everybody said, and they said, like, and we'll take half of the DOJ with us. Like U.S. attorneys, like half of them will go. And so Trump was basically like, that's probably a net negative.
Could be a headache.
That would be a net negative. Maybe we don't need this. And you realize like one or two people away from this situation, because I think it's also clear from the testimony that Pence wanted desperately to do this. He just couldn't find anybody who wasn't saying bad idea. But if he found one person, he had Eastman in his office for 4 hours on January 5th. Like, why? If you're not going to do this, why are you giving this guy 4 hours of your time or 3 hours of your time to make his case? And Pence's lawyers in there going like, this doesn't make any sense, right? And Pence is just going, well, tell me more. Yeah. I mean, it's really...
I mean, that part, the details of with Johnson and Pence and this sort of thing is like, that's what gives meaning to the spectacle of violence you see, right? Like, because we don't have to be hypothetical about like, oh, could this have possibly worked? We know how they planned for it to work, and it didn't work, thank God. But it's interesting now, like Eastman seems to be set up to take a fall. You see a lot of articles saying like Trump's going to throw him under the bus, or Politico says his exposure is real. But if his exposure is real, it seems like Pence is too. Like, and that's like the story. That's if there's going to be a limited hangout, it's going to be, oh, Eastman's the bad guy and like was just going rogue. But he was doing what, like
going rogue?
Yeah.
Like going rogue from what? That's the point. Is that he the only reason why he's in the White House is because they want to hear his story. Mm-hmm. This is not like a guy who's already in the White House going rogue. He's a rogue guy. Going, whatever.
Straight invited in.
Yeah, invited in. I think this is, and the Times had a story that you've got Republicans who are bummed out that they're not on the committee now, and Trump is bummed out on the committee because the thing that is absent, like Fox can pretend this is not happening, but what they can't do, which they usually do, is they know what's coming. And they begin to create a narrative to fight what's coming. But because they don't have any Republicans on the committee, they can't anticipate what's happening day to day. And there's no talking points because they don't know what they're fighting against.
Yeah, like McCarthy explicitly had John Katko, that congressman from New York, broker the bipartisan deal, then scuttled it. Even though Katko is definitely more of like a moderate and less of an election denier than like Jim Jordan or Jim Banks would have been, there would have been a McCarthy ally on the committee.
Katko is bringing the information. This is coming. Right. You guys do with it as you will. Right. I mean, and they don't have that now. And so they're flying blind, and all they have is, trans people bad. Well, and that's the only answer they have.
Well, I mean, I think that's just because, like, leading up to these committee hearings and the televised portions of them, their two main narratives have been nothing happened that day. What you saw in the news was just a peaceful protest. People were just walking through the buildings. Anything that you hear to the contrary is a liberal MSNBC leftist myth. Or, okay, something did happen that day. There was like a sort of discrete acts of violence by Oath Keepers or Proud Boys unrelated to the presidency, but there was not some sort of a high-level master plan to actually overturn the election. And I think the committee hearings have done a good job of dispelling both of those things. And the part that we should be focusing on is, the Trump administration in a lot of ways was a time for a lot of Republicans and far-right Democrats to test the boundaries on what they could get away with. Test the boundaries in terms of what society and the various institutions that are in charge of maintaining law and order would allow if they just really tried to get away with it. And they got away with a lot of stuff. And right. So, in some ways we can't be surprised that they tried to pull, both because of the type of people they are, but also because there's a history of Republicans stealing elections in this country and the government sort of just rolling over, maybe in more subtle ways, but we can't be surprised that they just tried to go for a Hail Mary. And, they'll try to go for one again, maybe 2, 3, 4 election cycles down the line. Who knows? But like Trump, I think, operated as this beta test for a lot of what Republicans want to get done in, maybe 1 or 2 election cycles.
I totally agree. I totally agree. And my only critique would be that they're still trying to make this about like the Trumpers as opposed to the Republicans. And I can understand. I mean, what's interesting is, like, for instance, like take this guy Bowers, right? Like I in a million years, I would have never thought like, oh, I am sympathetic might be a little bit too strong of a word, but like that I appreciate his testimony. Let's put it that way, that I think it's helpful and useful. Fox. And by Fox, I just mean like the entire right-wing media enterprise. If they knew that Bowers was going to come up there, which they couldn't know, because, with if they knew weeks ago that he was going to come up there, which they couldn't know because they have nobody on the committee. They have no way of accessing that information. We would see a story here or there. He's a rhino or this and that. And he would already been made a villain in the context of the Fox News people. But he gets up there and he's like a die-in-the-hard Trumpy guy. And he's talking about how the Constitution is God-given and stuff like this. And but he also told Trump that he couldn't break the law. Like, and if that shit gets played for the right, like they don't have an answer for that.